Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador, as a Red Sox fan, I can tell you I certainly hope you do not get a pitching slot for the Red Sox.
I actually thought they might do a little better. If you
Careful, Gene.
2 points for Gene.
I don't want to oversimplify our successful strategy relative to the former Soviet Union, but we outcompeted them militarily, economically, and they finally cried uncle, whether that was from internal pressure or just a collapse of their competitiveness. I really can't say, but most successful strategies focus on a couple of things that are the most effective. And I don't know what those items might be. I'm just going to ask each of you to help me think about what should we really focus on. There's so many things we need to do as we confront a Russia that we can't trust, a Russia that is assertive, aggressive, and brutal. But are there some things that we're really not getting right yet, that we're not focused on sufficiently, that really ought to become the focus of our strategy? I hear a number of us thinking about we need to restrict their economy. It's a challenge when they have oil and gas and coal and Ukraine, excuse me, and uranium in such abundance. I mean, they're always going to have enough money, and the Russian people put up with awful things. In part, the alternative is going to a gulag. So where's the pressure point? Where are the places that we really ought to be applying more effort if we're going to try and change the course of Russian trajectory? Ambassador, why don't I begin with you and then turn to Dr. Kendall Taylor?
Well, I think Dr. Kendall Taylor made the point in her opening statement. The key is Ukraine. So it's interesting, Senator, you mentioned the word competition. Putin doesn't like competition. He lost the competition in Ukraine. The Russians lost the competition in Eastern Europe. The Eastern Europeans, when I hear the Russians talk about, well, your NATO is just moving west, what they don't acknowledge is their own behavior, the Russian behavior, has pushed those Eastern European countries to the west. Excuse me, NATO moving east. The Eastern European countries, they lost that competition. So what has he resorted to? War. One of the oldest forms of competition. You know, we can compete on ideas, economy, etc. He's chosen the venue now to wage a war in Ukraine for his Ruski Mir, his Russian Empire. He can't win that. We can talk about weapon systems and how much financial support the United States, as opposed to our allies, can provide. If we don't defeat his imperial mission in Ukraine, then the system that the United States and our allies and partners and the whole world, including China, have benefited from over the 75 plus years since the end of the Second World War, that will drive a final stake through it. The UN Security Council is already, unlike in 1990, when there was aggression by Iraq invading Kuwait, Security Council authorizes what became Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, but that was a UN Security Council authorized, voted by the Soviet Union, to expel militarily Iraq from Kuwait. That's not going to happen again. So I think Putin has chosen the place where we're going to compete, and he's chosen war because he's lost every other form of competition.
Thank you.
So I'll just foot stomp the Ukraine piece, and it's so important for everything the ambassador said, but I mean, it is critical that Russia is defeated, that Ukraine wins, because it will help Russians shed their imperial ambitions, and it teaches future Russian leaders important lessons about the limits of military power. I mean, I think it's critically important, and we shouldn't overstate it. I think on that front, what we're lacking, I mean, obviously there's more we can do in terms of ATACMS and longer range weapons, but one thing I am also concerned about is I don't think the Biden administration or Washington in general has a story about what happens to our support after the counteroffensive. And I think that it shapes Putin's calculus. It's what convinces him that time is on his side and that the United States will tire. And so if there are things that the US Congress could do to demonstrate that we will have credible deliveries of weapons out into the future, I think that shapes Putin's calculus about our staying power. So if we could have something like that, I think it would be critically important. and having you all, the president and the administration, make a case to the American people about why this matters. I am concerned that we see some public support for Ukraine waning, and that is what Putin is counting on. But your question was bigger than that, and I don't think that there's any like magic point of leverage that we have. This really is a long-term confrontation. It is almost like the kind of containment 2.0 on an updated version. And so it is about constricting and constraining through sanctions, through export controls, by tightening those regimes. It's about strengthening deterrence in Europe. We have to be able to credibly commit to enhance and maintain deterrence in Europe. The Europeans, unfortunately, can't. This war has shown that Europe is not ready to defend themselves and that the United States must remain committed for the foreseeable future, although we can encourage them to build the European pillar within NATO. We have to grow the coalition of countries countering Russia. We have to mitigate the Russia-China partnership, and we have to continue to work to weaken autocracy's grip. There will be a post-Putin Russia. I'm not optimistic necessarily about what it looks like, but there could be an opening that didn't exist before. So the civil society pieces, supporting investigative journalism, all of those pieces, anti-corruption. I mean, that's what the lifeblood of Putin's regime. The more the US Congress can do on our real estate markets, on all of those types of things, that where we have seen so much progress in the aftermath, it's just staying the course and doing it for the long term because it is a long-term confrontation.
Thank you.
Dr.